He became a millionaire and moved his mother from the township to a mansion. 3 months later, his wife poured boiling water on her. This is the true story that made South Africa weep. Welcome to Voice of Granny. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and comment your view on the story and where you're watching from. Let me tell you a story that will break your heart before it heals it. A story about a mother's love, a son's success, and the terrible price of forgetting where you come from. In the dusty streets of Khayelitsha, just outside Cape Town, there lived a woman named Mama Zola. Her hands were rough like tree bark, her back bent from years of carrying heavy loads, but her smile, her smile could light up the darkest shack in the township. Every morning, before the sun kissed the hills of Table Mountain, Mama Zola was already awake. She would light a small fire outside her tin-roofed home, boil water in a blackened pot, and make porridge for her only son, Thabo. The smoke would curl up into the pink dawn sky, mixing with 1,000 other cooking fires across Khayelitsha. Mama Zola worked harder than anyone I've ever known. She sold vegetables at the market, washed clothes for richer families in the suburbs, and carried bundles of firewood on her head. Her feet knew every stone on the dusty paths between the shacks. Her shoulders knew the weight of survival. But she never complained. Not once. Because every rand she earned, every blister on her hands, every ache in her bones, it was all for Thabo. Her beautiful boy with eyes bright as stars and a mind sharper than any knife. "Mama," he would say, sitting by the fire doing his homework by candlelight, "one day I will buy you a house with electricity and running water. A house where you never have to carry water buckets again." She would laugh, touching his cheek with her worn hand. "My son, you are already my palace. Your dreams are my electricity. Just promise me one thing. When you climb high, never forget the soil that grew your roots." Thabo promised. Oh, how he promised. The years passed like seasons. Thabo studied hard, so hard that his teachers said they had never seen a boy so determined. And then the miracle happened. He won a full scholarship to study business at a university in London. The whole of Khayelitsha celebrated. Drums played, people danced, and Mama Zola cried tears that mixed with her laughter. The day he left for the airport, she held him tight. "Go and shine, my son," she whispered. "But remember, the brightest light is useless if it forgets to warm the people who helped it glow." He nodded, hugged her one last time, and walked toward his new life. Letters came at first. Then phone calls, but fewer and fewer. Then just messages on holidays. Mama Zola understood. Her son was busy building the future she had dreamed for him. She would sit outside her shack, listening to neighbors talk about their children, and she would smile proudly. "My Thabo is doing big things in London," she would say. But then tragedy struck. One rainy night, Mama Zola slipped on the muddy path carrying water. She fell hard, so hard that something broke inside her that would never heal. The doctors at the public hospital did what they could, but when she left, she was in a wheelchair. Her strong legs, the legs that had walked miles every day for 50 years, would never carry her again. Life became harder. Much harder. Neighbors helped when they could, but everyone in Khayelitsha was struggling. Mama Zola learned to move herself around in that old wheelchair, its wheels squeaking on the dusty ground. She learned to cook sitting down, to wash clothes sitting down, to live a smaller life. But she never stopped being proud of Thabo. He had graduated, she heard. He was working for a big oil company. Then he started his own business. The years stretched long and she grew older, thinner, more tired. 10 years passed like a slow river. Then one morning, a shiny black car pulled up outside her shack. 2 men in suits stepped out, looking completely out of place among the tin roofs and dirt paths. They asked for Mama Zola. "We've been sent by Mr. Thabo Mthembu," they said. "He wants to bring you to live with him in Johannesburg. He's a very successful businessman now." Mama Zola's hands trembled. Her eyes filled with tears. After 10 long years, her son had remembered. He was coming back for her. The whole township came out to watch as she was carefully lifted into the car. Children waved, women ululated with joy, and old men nodded with approval. Everyone knew that a good son always brings his mother home. As the car drove away from Khayelitsha, Mama Zola looked back at the place where she had raised her boy on nothing but love and determination. She didn't know then that she was leaving behind the only place where she truly belonged. She didn't know that the palace waiting for her would feel more like a prison. And she certainly didn't know about the woman who was waiting there, a woman who would see her not as a mother to be honored, but as an obstacle to be removed. The wheels of that old wheelchair would soon roll across marble floors instead of dusty paths. But sometimes the smoothest floors are the coldest ones. The gates of the Sandton estate opened like the mouth of another world. Mama Zola had never seen anything like it. As the car drove through, her eyes grew wide with wonder and something else, a small whisper of fear. The mansion stood before her like something from a television screen, all white walls and glass windows that sparkled in the Johannesburg sun. There were tall pillars, a fountain with actual water flowing from it, and gardens so green they looked painted. The air even smelled different here, like expensive flowers and new money. Thabo stepped out of the house, and Mama Zola's heart nearly burst. Her son. Her boy. But he looked so different. He wore a suit that probably cost more than her shack, expensive sunglasses, and shoes so shiny she could see her reflection in them. He was handsome, successful, everything she had prayed for. He hugged her, and for a moment, everything felt right. "Mama," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I told you I would bring you to a better life. Welcome home." But whose home was this really? That's what Mama Zola wondered as she looked up at the enormous house. Then she appeared. Thabo's wife, Naledi, stepped onto the balcony above. She was beautiful in a sharp, cold way, like a diamond that cuts when you touch it. Her weave was perfect, her dress was pure white silk, and her perfume reached Mama Zola even from that distance. But it was her eyes that told the real story. They looked at the old woman in the wheelchair, at the worn blanket on her lap, at the old plastic bag with her few belongings, and something flickered there. Not warmth. Not welcome. Something else. "Welcome, Mama," Naledi said in English, her accent crisp and expensive. "We've prepared a room for you. Unfortunately, it's downstairs. The upstairs isn't suitable for wheelchairs." The words were polite, but they landed like stones. They wheeled Mama Zola inside, and her breath caught. Everything was white, white marble floors, white walls, white furniture. It was beautiful, yes, but it felt empty. Like a museum, not a home. There was no warmth, no cooking smoke, no laughter of neighbors. Just silence and the echo of expensive shoes on cold floors. Her room was at the end of a long hallway. Small, clean, modern. There was a bed, a table, and a single purple orchid in a fancy pot. But there was no window to see the garden, no sounds of life outside. It was quiet. Too quiet. That first night, they had dinner together. The dining room was enormous, with a table so long you could get lost trying to reach the other end. Candles flickered, wine glasses sparkled, and soft music played from invisible speakers. Thabo talked about business deals, about millions of rands, about meetings with government ministers. His words were fast, confident, completely foreign to Mama Zola's ears. She tried to tell a story, about the neighbor in Kailicha who used to share sugar when they had none, about the children who would visit her and sing songs. But before she could finish, Naledi interrupted smoothly. "That's lovely, Mama, but Thabo and I need to discuss the London partnership tonight. Business, you understand." Mama Zola nodded and went quiet. She looked at her son, waiting for him to say something, to tell his wife that his mother's stories mattered. But Thabo just smiled apologetically and said, "Tomorrow, Mama. We'll talk tomorrow." Tomorrow came and went. And the day after. And the week after. Mama Zola found herself living in a beautiful cage. A young maid would bring her food 3 times a day, but she never stayed to chat. Sometimes Mama Zola would hear laughter from the living room. Thabo and Naledi entertaining guests, drinking wine, talking about things that felt a million miles away from Kailicha. One afternoon, she wheeled herself toward the living room, hoping to join them. But Naledi appeared in the doorway, blocking her path gently but firmly. "Mama, the guests today are very important business people. Perhaps it's better if you rest in your room? The medication you take has such a strong smell, and some people are sensitive." Mama Zola looked down at her lap, at her worn hands that had once carried her son on her back, that had worked until they bled to pay for his school books. "I see," she said quietly. "I will stay in my room then." From that day, something broke inside her. Not her body, that had been broken before, but something in her spirit. She realized that she had been brought here not to be honored, but to be hidden. Like an old piece of furniture that's too sentimental to throw away, but too embarrassing to display. Thabo still visited her, but his visits grew shorter. He would kiss her forehead, ask if she needed anything, but his eyes were always on his phone, his mind always somewhere else. The glass wall between them grew thicker every day. One evening, as rain fell on the expensive roof, Mama Zola smelled the wet earth through a crack in her window. It reminded her of Kailicha of home. Tears rolled down her cheeks. She realized then what had happened. Her son had climbed so high that he could no longer see where he came from. And his wife. Naledi saw Mama Zola not as a mother who had sacrificed everything, but as a threat. A reminder of poverty. A stain on their perfect, expensive life. But Mama Zola didn't know the worst part yet. She didn't know that Naledi's resentment was growing into something darker. Something dangerous. Something that would soon boil over, quite literally, and change all their lives forever. The storm was coming, and it smelled like burnt flesh and broken promises. Listen closely to this part of the story, because this is where everything breaks. This is where we see what happens when a heart becomes so cold that it forgets what it means to be human. It was a bright Johannesburg morning, the kind where the sun shines so hard it hurts your eyes. Thabo had left early for a business trip to Cape Town. He had kissed Naledi goodbye, then stopped by his mother's room. "Mama, I'll be back in 3 days," he said, squeezing her hand. "Naledi will take care of you." Mama Zola smiled weakly. "Go well, my son." As his car disappeared through the gates, the house fell into a heavy silence. Naledi stood at the window, watching him go, and then she turned. Her expression changed. The fake smile disappeared. You see, there was something Mama Zola didn't know. A week earlier, Naledi had presented her with papers. Legal documents that would transfer 20% of Thabo's company shares into Naledi's name. All it needed was Mama Zola's signature. "It's just a formality," Naledi had said sweetly. "For tax purposes. Sign here, Mama." But Mama Zola, despite her simple education, wasn't foolish. She had looked at those papers carefully. "My son's business is not mine to give away," she had said softly but firmly. "If he wants you to have this, he will give it to you himself." Naledi's smile had frozen. "You don't understand business, old woman." "Maybe I don't understand business," Mama Zola had replied, "but I understand greed. And I won't sign." That refusal had planted a seed of hatred in Naledi's heart. And now, with Thabo gone, that seed was about to bloom into violence. Mama Zola was in her room that morning, trying to will herself toward the small window. She wanted to feel some sunlight on her face. The weather was so nice, and she had a blanket she wanted to dry, the old one from Kailicha that still smelled faintly of wood smoke and home. She heard the sharp click of high heels approaching. Naledi appeared in the doorway. "Mama, why do you still use that dirty old blanket?" Her voice was sharp, accusing. "Because it's still warm," Mama Zola answered gently. "It reminds me of when Thabo was small, when we had nothing but each other." Naledi laughed, a bitter, ugly sound. "He's not that dirty township boy anymore. He's a sophisticated businessman. You need to understand your place here." "My dear," Mama Zola said, her voice still calm, "being sophisticated doesn't mean forgetting where you come from. True class is in the heart, not in marble floors." Something snapped in Naledi's eyes. "I'm tired of this. Tired of your old stories, your smelly ointments, your constant presence reminding him of that slum. You won't sign the papers? Fine. Maybe you need to learn who really owns this house." She turned and walked toward the kitchen. Mama Zola felt her heart begin to race. Something was wrong. Very wrong. In the kitchen, Naledi unplugged the electric kettle. It had been boiling for tea. Steam poured from its spout like angry breath. She lifted it, feeling its weight, feeling the heat radiating from the metal. She walked back to Mama Zola's room, carrying the kettle. Her hands were steady. Her face was a mask of cold fury. "Naledi," Mama Zola whispered, trying to will backward, but the carpet caught her wheels. "Please, my child. Don't do this." "I am not your child," Naledi screamed. And then she tilted the kettle. Time seemed to slow down. The boiling water poured out in a shimmering arc, catching the sunlight as it fell. It hit Mama Zola's shoulder, her arm, her chest. The scream that tore from her throat was the most terrible sound. The sound of a mother's pain, of betrayal, of shock that this could be happening. The kettle clattered to the marble floor. Boiling water spread across the white tiles like a guilty conscience, steaming, hissing. The smell of burnt skin filled the beautiful room. Mama Zola's eyes stayed open, fixed on the doorway, not with hatred but with such deep sadness. Her skin blistered, turned red and raw. Tears streamed down her face, but she didn't curse. She didn't scream revenge. She just whispered, "Why, my child? Why?" Naledi stood there, panting, her silk dress spotted with water, her hands shaking now that it was done. For a moment, she looked almost shocked at what she had done. Almost. "Now," she said, her voice trembling, Maybe you'll sign those papers. And that's when they heard it, the sound of a car in the driveway. The front door slamming open. Running footsteps. Tabo had turned back. Something, call it intuition, call it God, call it a mother's prayers, had made him uneasy about leaving. He had turned his car around at the highway, driven back fast, feeling a dread he couldn't explain. He burst through the door of his mother's room and froze. The scene before him was hell itself. Steam still rising. His mother collapsed in her wheelchair, her body twisted in agony, skin burned and blistering. His wife standing there with an empty kettle, water still dripping from her trembling hands. Naledi! His roar shook the walls. What have you done? He ran to his mother, falling to his knees, wrapping her in his jacket, tears streaming down his face. Mama, I'm here. I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry. Don't hate her, Mama Zola whispered through her pain. She's lost. Just like I was lost in this big house. Tabo looked up at his wife, and what he saw in his eyes made Naledi step back. It wasn't anger. It was something worse, complete and total disgust. I trusted you, he said, his voice breaking. I brought my mother here to honor her, and you tried to kill her. I didn't mean, Naledi started. Get out, he screamed. Get out of my sight. He lifted his mother in his arms. This woman who had carried him as a baby, who had carried his dreams on her back for years, and ran out into the day. The security guards stared. The gardener dropped his tools. The whole perfect world of that mansion cracked open like an egg, and all the rot inside poured out. As Tabo's car sped toward the hospital, Mama Zola looked up at her son's tear-stained face and whispered, My boy, you're crying. Don't cry. You found your heart again. That's all a mother needs. Behind them, in that beautiful, terrible mansion, Naledi sank to the floor, surrounded by puddles of cooling water and the ruins of her own soul. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and regret. In the burn unit of Charlotte Maxeyk Johannesburg Academic Hospital, Mama Zola lay wrapped in white bandages, half her body covered, her breathing shallow but steady. Machines beeped softly, monitoring her heart, a heart that had been broken long before the water touched her skin. Tabo sat beside her bed, holding her unbandaged hand so tightly, as if letting go would mean losing her forever. His eyes were red from crying, his expensive suit wrinkled and stained. He looked like a man who had woken up from a terrible dream, only to find that the nightmare was real. Mama, he whispered, his voice raw. I've called the police. Naledi will pay for this. I swear on everything I have, she will pay. But Mama Zola shook her head slightly, and even that small movement made her wince with pain. No, my son, she breathed. Don't let anger poison you like greed poisoned her. Forgiveness is the only medicine that can heal your soul. Mama, she tried to kill you. How can you defend her? Because you once loved her, Mama Zola said, each word costing her. And because I don't want you to carry hatred in your heart. It's heavier than any load I ever carried in Khayelitsha. Outside the hospital room, journalists had gathered like hungry birds. The story had exploded across South Africa. Billionaire's wife scalds disabled mother, screamed the headlines. Photos of Tabo carrying his burned mother had gone viral. Everyone was talking about it, in taxis, in shebeens, in offices, in shacks. The whole country was watching. But Tabo didn't care about the headlines. He cared about the truth. And he needed to see it with his own eyes. 3 days later, he returned to the mansion with Inspector Mabesa from the police. The house felt different now, cold, empty, haunted by what had happened. They went straight to the security room, where all the camera footage was stored. Let's see exactly what happened, Inspector Mabesa said, connecting the computer. The footage began to play. There was Naledi, entering Mama Zola's room. There was the argument. You could see it even without sound, the aggressive gestures, the anger. And then, clear as day, Naledi walked to the kitchen, unplugged the kettle, returned, and deliberately poured boiling water on a helpless old woman. But there was something else that made Tabo break down completely. In the footage, as the water fell, Mama Zola didn't try to shield herself. Instead, her hands reached out to protect something on the table beside her, a framed photograph. A picture of young Tabo graduating from university. Even in that moment of unimaginable pain, she was protecting her son's memory. Tabo collapsed in the chair, sobbing like a child. She tried to kill my mother, the woman who gave me everything. And Mama was protecting my photograph. Inspector Mabesa put a hand on his shoulder. There's more you need to see. He fast-forwarded to after Tabo had left with his mother. Naledi was on the floor, crying, not from remorse, but from frustration. She crawled to where papers lay scattered, the share transfer documents, and she screamed at them. I just needed her to sign. Just sign. Why couldn't the old woman just sign? The truth hit Tabo like a second burn. It was all about money. She wanted my company. And when Mama refused, this is what she did. That evening, when he returned to the hospital, he found his mother awake, staring at the ceiling. He sat down beside her, and this time he didn't hide his tears. Mama, I watched the video. I saw everything. I saw what she did. And I saw what you did. You tried to save my picture while your skin was burning. Mama Zola turned her head slightly to look at him. Of course I did. That picture shows the day my sacrifices became worth it. Why wouldn't I protect it? Mama, I failed you. I brought wealth into my life and forgot wisdom. I married a woman who saw you as an obstacle instead of a queen. I let you be treated like you were nothing when you are everything. My son, she said softly, you didn't fail. You learned. That's what life is. One long lesson in remembering what matters. What should I do, Mama? Tell me what to do. She smiled, despite the pain. Do what your heart tells you. Not your anger. Not your pride. Your heart. 2 days later, Naledi was arrested. The media went crazy. Camera flashes lit up the police station like lightning. She was brought out in handcuffs, her beautiful face now swollen from crying, her designer clothes replaced with a gray prison uniform. When she saw Tabo standing there, she broke down. Tabo, please. I'm sorry. I was jealous. I was afraid you loved her more than me. I just wanted your attention. Tabo looked at her. This woman he had once promised to love forever. You had my attention, Naledi. You had my love. You had everything. But it wasn't enough, was it? You wanted my past erased. You wanted my mother erased. And that's something I can never forgive. As they took her away, Tabo felt something break and something else begin to heal inside him. The trial came quickly. The courtroom in Johannesburg was packed. People wanted to see justice served. And when the judge asked Tabo if he had anything to say, he stood up slowly. Your Honor, he began, his voice steady. I'm not here as a billionaire or a businessman. I'm here as a son who failed his mother. Yes, my wife committed a terrible crime. But I created the environment where she thought such cruelty was acceptable. I let wealth change me. I let success blind me. My mother taught me that true wealth is in character, but I forgot. So punish my wife, yes. But know that I'm punishing myself too. I'm stripping away everything that made me forget who I am. The judge sentenced Naledi to 5 years in prison for aggravated assault. It could have been more, but Mama Zola's plea for mercy had softened the sentence. As Tabo left the courthouse, it started to rain, soft, warm Johannesburg rain. He lifted his face to the sky and whispered, Thank you, Mama, for teaching me that even boiling water cools eventually. And when it does, you can see clearly again. 6 months passed like pages turning in a book of redemption. The mansion in Sandton was sold. The luxury cars gone. The expensive suits donated. Thabo Mthembu, once featured in Forbes Africa as one of the continent's richest young entrepreneurs, had made a choice that shocked the business world. He gave it all away. Not to disappear, but to rebuild. To go back to where it all began. On a bright morning, when the South African sun painted everything gold, a new bridge was inaugurated in Khayelitsha. It wasn't fancy, just strong wood and concrete, but it connected 2 parts of the township that had been divided by a difficult crossing. At the entrance, a bronze plaque read, Mama Zola's Bridge, for the mothers who carried us across impossible waters. The whole township turned out. Children in school uniforms, gogos in their colorful dresses, young men who had grown up with Tabo, neighbors who remembered Mama Zola selling vegetables with a baby strapped to her back. Drums played. People sang. The air was filled with celebration and something deeper, recognition. Recognition that one of their own had remembered where he came from. Tabo stood at the center of the bridge, dressed simply in jeans and a shirt, his feet in sandals, his heart finally at peace. Beside him, in a new wheelchair, sat Mama Zola. She was thinner now, scarred, but her smile was the same smile that had once lit up a tin-roofed shack. Mama, Tabo said, speaking to her but loud enough for everyone to hear. When I was young, you used to push a cart across dangerous paths to sell firewood. You carried me on your back while carrying our future on your head. Today, this bridge is for you. But more than that, it's for every mother in Khayelitsha, in Soweto, in every township across our beautiful country. For every mother who sacrifices everything so her children can walk across to a better life. The crowd erupted in ululation. That distinctive sound of joy that African women make that sounds like singing and crying at the same time. Mama Zola raised her hand for quiet. When she spoke, her voice was soft, but it carried. "My children," she said, addressing everyone, "I want to tell you something. When that boiling water touched my skin, I felt pain I cannot describe. But you know what hurt more? Seeing my son lost in a world of marble and money, forgetting the dusty paths that shaped him. Today, these scars on my body are healed. But more importantly, the scar in my son's heart is healing too. That is the real miracle." She looked up at Tabo, her eyes shining. "And to my son, I say this, you gave me a mansion, but it was empty. Now you've given me this bridge, and it's full of life. You've learned that true wealth isn't in what you own, but in what you give." Tabo knelt beside her wheelchair, tears flowing freely. "Mama, I created something called the Zola Foundation. It's for mothers who are abused, for disabled people who need help, for children in townships who dream big like I once did. Every rand I have left is going into this. Because you taught me that money is just paper, but love is the real currency." An old man from the crowd shouted, "That's the Tabo we knew. Welcome home, boy." And it was home. Real home. Not the cold mansion, but this, dusty streets, children laughing, the smell of wood smoke and grilled mielia, the sound of Queto music from someone's radio, neighbors who knew your name and your story. Over the following months, Tabo worked. Not in boardrooms, but alongside carpenters and builders. The Zola Foundation opened centers across Kailicha and other townships. They helped abused women escape dangerous situations. They provided wheelchairs and medical care for disabled people. They gave scholarships to bright children who just needed a chance. People started calling Tabo Umama Ka Zola, Zola's son. And he wore that title with more pride than he'd ever felt being called a billionaire. One evening, as the sun set over Cape Town, painting Table Mountain purple and gold, Tabo pushed his mother's wheelchair to the edge of the new bridge. They sat in comfortable silence, watching children play, watching life happen. "Tabo," Mama Zola said softly, "do you ever regret giving it all up?" He thought about it honestly. "I thought I would, Mama. But you know what? I sleep better now than I ever did in that mansion. My dreams aren't filled with profit margins and stock prices. They're filled with children's laughter and the pride in people's eyes when we help them. I'm richer now than I ever was." She reached for his hand. "You know, when you were a baby, I used to worry. How will I feed him? How will I educate him? How will I give him a future? But I never worried about your heart. I always knew you had a good heart. It just got lost for a while. You found it, Mama. When that water burned you, it woke me up. It was the most painful lesson, but it saved me." As darkness fell, the township lights began to flicker on, small lights, but thousands of them, like earthbound stars. Somewhere nearby, someone was cooking over a fire, and the smell of wood smoke drifted over. Mama Zola breathed it in deeply. "Now this," she said, smiling, "this is home." 3 years later, Mama Zola passed away peacefully in her sleep, in a small house near the bridge, surrounded by people who loved her. The entire township mourned. But they didn't just mourn, they celebrated. They celebrated a woman who had shown them that strength isn't about how much you can carry, but about how much love you can hold even when your hands are empty. At her funeral, Tabo spoke to thousands of people. "My mother taught me the most important lesson. You can lose everything, your money, your status, your pride, and still be rich if you have love and purpose." She survived poverty. She survived disability. She even survived having boiling water poured on her by someone she tried to welcome as a daughter. But she never survived without love. And neither can any of us. Today, if you visit Kailicha, you'll find Mama Zola's bridge still standing strong. Thousands of people cross it every day. And on that bronze plaque, Tabo added one more line. "She carried me across poverty so I could carry others across pain." As for Tabo, he still lives in the township. He never remarried. He says his wife is his work and his children are every child who crosses that bridge to school each morning. And sometimes, early in the morning before the sun rises, you can see him standing on the bridge, looking out over Kailicha as smoke rises from 1,000 breakfast fires. And if you listen closely, you might hear him whisper, "Thank you, Mama, for teaching me that the hottest water cools down eventually. And when it does, you can finally see your reflection clearly. And you can finally see what really matters." This is a story for every son and daughter who forgets their mother's sacrifices. For every person who climbs the ladder of success and kicks it down behind them. Remember, You can build a mansion out of marble, but if there's no love inside it, you're just living in an expensive tomb. Honor your mother. Remember your roots. And never, ever let success make you cruel. Share this story if you've been blessed by a mother's love. Comment below where you're watching from, Johannesburg, Cape Town, Durban, or anywhere in the world. And type, "Thank you, Mama," to honor the woman who carried you into this world and carries you still in her prayers. Subscribe for more stories that remind us what it means to be human.